Now, the Times this week have been reporting quite heavily on the actual real prospect that Rishi Sunak could be ousted from the party, that the Tories could be going for their fourth Prime Minister since the last election.
I do not think Rishi Sunak will be Tory leader by the time of the next election. I think the mood amongst Tory MPs, I think, is turning. I think there have been a number of triggers for it. I wonder whether it's time for Rishi Sunak to do Theresa May and leave before it gets too bloody.
Do you think it's got to the point of the fabled, the cliched men in grey suits saying something?
I hope so, and that would be. Rishi Sunak has done his best. He's not made the mistakes that Liz Truss arrogantly made. I think he's a genuine public servant. I think he's a good man.
Sorry, what was that?
I think he's a good man.
Can I just remind you of a couple of things? Like the time Rishi Sunak wanted to take funds away from our deprived inner cities. You know, our cities, our pothole-ridden cities, our boarded-up cities. When he wanted to take money away from that and siphon it to rich areas.
I managed to start changing the funding formulas to make sure that areas like this are getting the funding that they deserve. Because we inherited a bunch of formulas from the Labour Party that shoved all the funding into deprived urban areas. Then that needed to be undone. I started the work of undoing that.
Or his just general disdain for the working class.
I have friends who are aristocrats, I have friends who are upper class, I have friends who are, working class, but I'm not working class, but I mix and match, and then I go to see.
Or the time he asked a homeless man if he was in business.
Yeah, it's a great place, isn't it? Yeah, it's a superb job. Right, that's that. That's some cutlery. Let me get. We don't want the economy out. Well, that is exactly what I'm trying to do. Exactly what I'm trying to do. There's the business. What do you have? Do you work in a business? Do you want some fruit?
I'm homeless. I'm actually a homeless person. But...
Or the time he made trans jokes in Parliament when the grieving mother of a murdered trans girl was in the audience.
But it's a bit rich, Mr. Speaker, to hear about promises from someone who's broken every single promise he was elected on. I mean, I think I counted almost 30 in the last year. Pensions, planning, peerages, public sector pay, tuition fees, childcare, second referendums, defining a woman. Although in fairness, that was only 99% of a U-turn.
Of all the weeks to say that, when Brianna's mother is in this chamber, shame.
Now, it doesn't matter where you sit on the trans debate. The fact of the matter is this girl was murdered, and she was murdered because she was trans, and her grieving mother was in the audience in Parliament that day, and he was making trans jokes. Is that the actions of a good man? And now they're talking about bringing Boris Johnson back.
Let's move on to another big headline of the week, and also a headline in the Times today. Boris isn't done. Is that a threat or a promise, do you think, Kat Neelan?
That is a very good way of framing it, and I'm sure that there will be some in and around Rishi Sunak's circle who do see it as a threat. Look, I mean, this Boris comeback has been one of those stories that sort of floats about ever since he left. Really, he's the guy that the Tories just can't quit. But there is clearly a concern within the Sunak camp that he doesn't connect with voters, particularly in the red wall. And there has been this suggestion that Boris Johnson could come back and could do that.
Do they think we're stupid? I mean, I understand there's still a lot of Tory MPs that like Boris Johnson and would like to see him back, but do they honestly believe the public want to see him back? Do they think that he's a vote winner? Do they think that we have like 2-second memories? Do they think that we've forgotten that when he was telling us to do this...
You should not be meeting friends. If your friends ask you to meet, you should say no.
He was doing this. And when grandparents were doing this with their grandchildren, our health secretary was doing this in the corridors of number 10. Or when the Queen had to sit by herself at her husband's funeral, this lot were doing this in number 10. It doesn't matter. Again, it doesn't matter where you sit on the lockdown thing. I know a lot of people don't agree with the lockdowns and thought that it never should have happened. But the fact of the matter is that these guys were telling us to lock down while not doing it themselves. It doesn't matter if you agree with lockdowns or not. The only thing you can agree on is the pure hypocrisy from Boris Johnson's government at the time. With Boris Johnson, they've pissed off their core voter base. So why would they go back to that? Their core voter base of over 50s, homeowners that love the Queen, that couldn't see their grandchildren during the pandemic. They've pissed them off. So Boris Johnson is not going to bring that back. Now, going back to the point of the video of should they change leader, I mean, they're polling so bad right now that I don't think it would make much difference. It may even improve. A few months back, you'd think it would be ludicrous for them to go for a fourth leader, but at this point, they're doing so bad that it probably wouldn't make any difference. You know, the talk is about reform doing well and should they move further to reform-style politics. But, I mean, you don't need to be an expert in politics to understand that when you look at the polling, okay, yeah, reform are doing better, but they're polling at 10%. 10% of the country want to vote for this lot. So if the Conservatives move further towards reform and, I don't know, put a Suella Braverman in charge or something, they're going to drop even further. Stupid. The only way they could possibly improve their situation is to move further towards where the polling is good, with Labour at 40%. Now, it's hard to judge how much of that 40% is just people that want the Tories out and how many of that 40% is actually people that are fond of Labour policies. But the only way they can come back from this, the Tories, the only way they could have a slight shred of a chance of winning the next election is to move closer to that voter base. So you think, I mean, Rishi Sunak was supposed to be that person, wasn't he, when he came in? He was supposed to be stability and going back to proper politics, but he's been useless. He's been pandering to both sides. He's weak. He's a fool. He's an idiot. He can't control the factions of the party, and he panders to each side, to the right, to the centre. The only way they could possibly get back to any sort of winnable political party is by moving closer to that Labour polling. But I don't know who you stick in charge there. Jeremy Hunt is supposed to be the sensible one, isn't he? But everyone knows that he's a cunt. I mean, literally single-handedly destroyed the NHS over the last 10 years. So who else is there to go back to that more centrist politics? Rory Stewart, I think, would possibly be the only option to get them back to some sort of winnable political party, but then he's not an MP, so he can't be leader. But then I think anything's possible now. If bloody David Cameron can come back in and be foreign minister, and if we can have 3 unelected prime ministers, anything's possible, I guess. If you like the video, click a like. If you haven't subscribed, you can subscribe up top. There'll be another video there as well. I've also stuck another video on my members page. If that interests you, become a member for 99p. I've just recently done a video, a bit more personal. I'm about to turn 40, how I feel about that. And till next time, take care.
I think he's a good man.
I have friends who are, you know, working class, but I'm not working class, but
I think he's a good man.
Because we inherited a bunch of formulas from the Labour Party that shoved all the funding into deprived urban areas, then that needed to be undone. I started the work of undoing that.
I think he's a good man.